Iran fired cruise missiles and drones at U.S. flagships.
Iranian forces launched drones towards U.S. warships.
No ship passed through the Strait of Hormuz during the first 24 hours of the American blockade.
43 dots appear on the radar. At first, they look harmless, tiny, almost insignificant. But in modern naval warfare, the smallest blips can carry the biggest consequences. In the narrow throat of the Strait of Hormuz, where a fifth of the world's oil passes through a waterway so tight it feels like a loaded trigger, one U.S. warship suddenly finds itself staring into a storm of steel, fuel, and fire. This is not just a battle story. It's a story about pressure, about nerves, about what happens when the world's most powerful navy is forced to fight inside a choke point designed by geography and exploited by strategy. Because Hormuz is not just a shipping lane. It is a trapdoor beneath the global economy. One wrong move there does not stay there. It spreads into oil markets, into diplomacy, into households a continent away wondering why gas prices just spiked overnight. And on this day, the pressure reaches a breaking point. A U.S. destroyer cuts through dark, tense water under sky that feels too quiet. The crew knows the stakes. Every sailor on board has trained for missile attack, drone swarms, electronic jamming, and fast boat harassment. But training and reality are two different worlds. In training, the screen resets. In reality, it doesn't. In reality, when the alarm sounds, you are not protecting a simulation. You are protecting the ship beside you. The sailors below deck. The mission. The flag. Then the warning comes in. Multiple inbound contacts. Not one. Not 5. Not 10. A swarm. And in the kind of battle that unfolds in seconds but gets remembered for decades, the question is no longer whether the attack is real. The question is whether the ship can survive long enough to stop it. Tonight, we're breaking down the scenario everyone fears but few truly understand. How a mass drone assault in a Hormuz blockade could unfold, why the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth, and what happens when low-cost suicide drones collide with billion-dollar naval power in one of the world's most explosive flashpoints. Because when 43 attack drones race toward an American warship, this isn't just a test of firepower. It's a test of doctrine. It's a test of discipline. And it may be a test of how close the world really is to a regional war spiraling out of control. To understand why this kind of attack matters, you have to understand the battlefield itself. The Strait of Hormuz is not some open ocean where fleets maneuver freely and threats are visible from miles away. It is a bottleneck. Tight, crowded, politically radioactive. It sits between Iran to the north and Oman to the south, linking the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. In simple terms, it is the front door to the energy arteries of the Middle East. If that door is blocked, delayed, mined, or militarized, the entire world feels it. Think of it like this. Imagine a major city where nearly every supply truck must cross one narrow bridge. Now imagine that bridge is watched by armed men on rooftops, drones in the sky, speedboats in the water, missiles hidden in nearby hills, and cameras everywhere. That is Hormuz. It is not just a route. It is a pressure valve. And every vessel passing through it is entering a zone where commerce and combat can collide with terrifying speed. That's why navies hate choke points. In open water, distance is protection. In a choke point, distance disappears. The enemy doesn't need to sink a carrier to make a statement. It only needs to create uncertainty. A damaged tanker. A drone strike. A radar lock. A warning shot. A mine scare. Any one of those can do what a missile sometimes cannot. Freeze movement, spike insurance costs, rattle markets, and force powerful governments into hard decisions under bad conditions. Now add drones to that equation. This is where the old rules begin to break down. For decades, naval power was measured in carriers, cruisers, submarines, and missiles. Big platforms. Big budgets. Big deterrence. But the drone age has introduced a dangerous asymmetry. A one-way attack drone may cost a fraction of the interceptor missile used to shoot it down. Launch enough of them, from enough angles, at low enough altitude, and suddenly a superpower is forced into a brutal math problem. Not just, can we kill these targets, but can we kill all of them fast enough, cheaply enough, and without exposing ourselves to the next wave? That is what makes swarm attacks so frightening. A single drone is a threat. A coordinated swarm is a system attack. It's designed to overload sensors, force rapid target prioritization, drain missile cells, create confusion, and open windows for follow-on strikes. One drone may be the decoy. Another may carry explosives. Another may be transmitting coordinates. Another may simply be bait, luring defensive fire while something deadlier slips through. Picture the combat information center aboard a destroyer. The room is dim, but every screen glows like a live wire. Operators scan contacts. Analysts compare speed, altitude, direction, signatures. The air defense officer starts classifying targets. Electronic warfare teams listen for signals. Command decisions compress into seconds. There is no luxury of debate. If the swarm is real, hesitation can be fatal. But if you fire too early, too broadly, or at the wrong objects, you may burn through critical defenses before the true attack even begins. And that is exactly why the phrase suicide drone unsettles military planners. These weapons don't need to survive. They don't need to return. They don't even need to be individually impressive. Their job is simpler and darker than that. They need to arrive. They need to confuse. They need to strike something important enough to send a message. And in Hormuz, the message writes itself. If an American warship can be overwhelmed or even visibly damaged in that narrow corridor, the symbolic effect would be enormous. It would tell every tanker captain, every shipping insurer, every oil trader, and every regional government the same thing. The passage is no longer guaranteed. The shield has cracks. So now imagine the timeline. The ship is escorting traffic or transiting a tense zone under restrictive rules of engagement. Intelligence has already warned of launch activity ashore. Small boats have been seen shadowing nearby lanes. Electronic interference has increased. The crew is at elevated alert, but elevated alert can't last forever. Human beings get tired. Muscles lock. Focus narrows. That's why attacks often come not when nobody expects them, but when everybody has been expecting them for too long. Then the first layer appears. Not missiles. Drones. They come low, irregular, maybe staggered. Some fast, some slow. Some from the coastline, some from commercial clutter, some from directions calculated to exploit radar-blind zones or civilian traffic patterns. On the screens, it's messy. On deck, it's worse. Lookouts scan the horizon. Gunners prepare for close-in engagement. The captain knows something civilians often miss. A drone swarm doesn't merely threaten the hull. It threatens antennas, radar faces, communication arrays, exposed weapon systems, optics, flight decks, and confidence. A ship can remain afloat and still be tactically hurt. Then comes the first order. Engage. And with that single word, the choreography of survival begins. The public often imagines naval combat as gigantic explosions and dramatic broadside duels. But real modern ship defense is more like a layered emergency surgery performed at high speed under mortal pressure. Every second matters. Every layer matters. And every layer has one job: buy time for the next. First comes detection and classification. The ship must figure out what is noise and what is a weapon. In a busy maritime corridor, that is brutally hard. A fishing skiff, a merchant vessel, a helicopter track, a drone, a false return, a decoy signal, electronic spoofing, radar clutter from land, all of it can merge into a fog of uncertainty. That is the attacker's opportunity. Second comes electronic warfare. Jam the drone. Break its signal. Confuse its navigation. Force it off course. If that works, great. You've neutralized a threat without spending a missile that may cost exponentially more. But not every drone is easy to jam. Some may be pre-programmed. Some may be hardened against interference. Some may be part of a layered attack where the jamming itself is being measured and exploited. Third comes kinetic interception. This is the hard edge of defense. Missiles, deck guns, close-in weapon systems, possibly even helicopters or escort ships depending on the formation. The goal is not cinematic destruction. The goal is ruthless efficiency. Kill chain after kill chain. One contact at a time. Then faster than one at a time. Then as many as the system can handle before the geometry becomes too crowded. But here's the problem no one likes to talk about. Defending is expensive. Attacking is cheap. The attacker chooses time, density, and angle. The defender must be right repeatedly. A drone operator can afford a failed attempt. A warship commander cannot afford a successful hit. That's why saturation is everything. If the number is 43, the significance is not the number itself. It's what the number represents. Enough airborne threats to force prioritization. Enough to stress the combat system. Enough to test the crew's endurance and training. Enough to create that awful moment every air defense officer fears, when there are more inbound threats than comfortable engagement windows. Now imagine the sensory overload. Sirens. Radio calls. Impact reports from intercepts. Bright streaks of outgoing fire. Tracers arcing across black water. The close-in gun roaring at the final few seconds of an inbound run. Tiny fireballs in the distance as drones break apart. Debris splashing into the sea. Then another contact. Then another. Then another. This is where training becomes character. A sailor on a missile console is not thinking geopolitics. He is thinking track number, range, bearing, speed. A gunner is not thinking about oil futures in Singapore. She is thinking lead angle and burst timing. The captain is not speaking in grand rhetoric. He is making terrible, necessary choices in plain language. Protect the ship. Protect the formation. Keep moving. Don't lose the picture. And beyond the tactical layer lies the strategic one. Because a drone swarm in Hormuz is never just about sinking steel. It's about shaping decisions. If the attack is repelled, the attacker still learns. Which systems activated first? How quickly did the ship respond? Which weapons were used? How much ammunition was likely spent? Did commercial traffic halt? Did insurers panic? Did foreign governments call for restraint? Did markets react before diplomats did? That is the new battlefield. Data, perception, tempo. A swarm attack is not only a strike. It is reconnaissance through violence. And if any drone breaks through, even if the damage is limited, the psychological effect multiplies. A hit on a radar array can reduce awareness. A hit on the flight deck can complicate aviation operations. A hit near exposed systems can generate smoke, confusion, and cascading risk. Fire at sea is one of the oldest nightmares in naval history because it turns the ship against itself. Electrical lines, fuel, heat, munitions, confined spaces. Every compartment becomes part of the fight. That is why damage control is sacred in naval culture. Because that's the terrifying thing about Hormuz. Escalation there does not need permission. It can happen by accumulation. One intercepted drone becomes 10. One damaged ship becomes retaliatory strikes. One retaliatory strike becomes cross-border proxy fire. One misread signal becomes a national humiliation nobody wants to absorb quietly. History is full of wars that began not with a master plan, but with a chain reaction. A convoy hit here. A reprisal there. A line crossed. A warning ignored. A domestic audience demanding strength. In a region packed with missiles, drones, oil infrastructure, and rival militias, escalation can move faster than diplomacy can type a statement. So if a US warship is confronted by 43 one-way attack drones in the middle of a Hormuz blockade, the battle is not only about whether the ship survives. It is about whether restraint survives. Whether command and control survives. Whether politicians on all sides can resist the urge to answer spectacle with spectacle. And that may be the real story behind the headline. Not just the drones, but the trap they create. Because the purpose of swarm warfare is not only to destroy targets. It is to corner decision-makers. To force them into responses that are costly, visible, and politically binding. It is to create a moment where everybody still technically has options, but none of those options feel safe. That is how narrow seas become wide crises. So let's step back from the radar screens and the muzzle flashes for a second. A destroyer in Hormuz is more than a ship. It is a moving statement. It says the sea lane stays open. It says deterrence still functions. It says commerce will not be held hostage by fear. But a drone swarm sends a different message. It says the old rules are changing. It says the era of cheap, disposable, high-volume threats has arrived. And it says even the most advanced military on Earth can be dragged into a brutal contest of reaction time, ammunition depth, and political nerve. That is why this scenario matters so much. Not because drones are invincible. They are not. And not because warships are helpless. They are not. But because the balance between offense and defense is shifting in real time. The battlefield is becoming cheaper for the attacker and more complicated for the defender. And nowhere is that more dangerous than in a choke point where the entire world is already one spark away from panic. If the ship defeats the swarm, it proves discipline, technology, and training still matter. If even one drone gets through, it proves something else, that future conflict may not begin with fleets colliding in open ocean, but with dozens of low-cost machines racing across a narrow sky toward one very expensive target. That is the lesson of Hormuz. Power is no longer measured only by how much force you can project. It is measured by how much pressure you can survive. And in the age of swarm warfare, survival may be the most important signal a navy can send. Because sometimes history doesn't announce itself with a declaration of war. Sometimes it appears first as 43 tiny dots on a radar screen. And by the time the world understands what they mean, the shooting has already started.